This is easily the biggest monthly wrap-up I have ever done. By my count, I've read 21 books this month, but that is for a kind of specific reason, which is that during this month I made a video where I challenged myself to read 5 books in a single day. If you haven't seen the video, they were all really short books, and I did manage to read all 5 of them in a day, and if I hadn't done that, I probably would have read about 15, which is kind of normal for me, but I read 21, and that does include a few manga as well that I'll get to. But before I do, if you've spent any amount of time watching this channel, you know that I am very frank and candid about my own struggles with mental health, which is why I'm really pleased and proud of the fact that this is a paid partnership with BetterHelp. I have personally struggled with depression and anxiety for, honestly, almost as far back as I can remember. And over the past few years, I have made some active attempts to actually improve my mental health, because our mental health is our health. And so through therapy and medication, I have been able to get a handle on my mental health. We all should do this. We all owe it to ourselves to be as good to our brains as we possibly can be. And BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easy, because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a credentialed therapist in as little as a few days. And by following the link in my description, you can sign up to BetterHelp and get matched with a therapist within just a few days. The link is betterhelp.com/booksandbow. Clicking the link gets you 10% off your first month with BetterHelp, and it also helps to support this channel. Something really cool about BetterHelp is the fact that you can really easily switch therapists. Finding the exact right therapist for you is really important, and if you don't gel with one therapist, you can switch to another. Actively seeking out help and support for my mental health struggles has literally saved my life. Depression and anxiety have been like ghosts haunting me all of my life, just like shadows looming over me, and sometimes I don't know when they're going to strike, when they're going to make my life so difficult. Having access to therapy means having access to the tools to help you through those moments, through those times, through those periods. So if you're struggling, consider getting online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in my description or go to betterhelp.com/booksandbow. Thank you again to BetterHelp for supporting this channel. Now back to this terrifying tower of tomes, which I'm going to talk about in no particular order. One of the best literary discoveries that I made in August was Claire Keegan. I had never read her before, and this month I read Small Things Like These. This is a powerful little novel, and I did a full review of it that you can go and watch, but something I mentioned there is the fact that this book got really misunderstood by a lot of readers on Goodreads, who talked about it being a shining, beautiful Christmas tale, and it's not that. It's a book that talks about the hypocrisies and the damages done by organized religion. It's a book set in a week or so leading up to Christmas in a small Irish town in the 1980s. Our protagonist is a man who was raised well by his mother and by a small community of people, and in turn he has done his best to raise 5 daughters. He's a good working class guy, he works hard, and he does right by his family. But his town is very much in the thrall of the church. It's a town full of hypocritical people who will turn their backs on the homeless while walking into mass. He keeps butting heads with members of the church, and we get to see all of these hypocrisies laid bare. It's a very powerful book that is full of hope and positivity, but is also bleak and very angry. It's a book that's primarily angry at organized religion, and as someone who is constantly angry at organized religion, I really enjoyed it for those reasons, and also for the fact that it's a beautiful literary Irish novel. One of the books that I read for that aforementioned 5 books in one day video was this, Beast in the Shadows by Edogawa Ranpo. This is a Japanese thriller translated by Ian Hughes. It was originally written at the turn of the 20th century, and it was pretty ahead of its time in a kind of metatextual way. Its protagonist is a guy who writes thrillers, but he's kind of become embroiled in a thriller in his own life when he meets a young woman who confesses to him that she's being stalked. She was being stalked as a teenager, but her stalker kind of gave up when she got married, but now he's back and he's threatening her life and the life of her husband. And she also reveals to our writer protagonist that this stalker is another writer of thrillers that our protagonist already doesn't like. So it seems pretty simple. It's a cut and dry cat and mouse game, but there's a lot more to it than that. It's absolutely tiny. It's less than 100 pages long. I read it in a morning and I loved it. Another book from that 5 books in one day challenge was this, a poetry collection by Grace Nichols. I had never read her before, and I feel kind of silly about that. But this, The Fat Black Woman's Poems, is a really beautiful collection, divided up into different thematic groups of poems. The first and arguably most powerful selection of poems in here is also titled The Fat Black Woman's Poems, and it's a celebration of blackness and fatness and general life joy. It is about a fat black woman looking in the mirror and finding her beauty and celebrating it. It's a really, really gorgeous body positivity selection of poems from around the 1980s, which is a time when body positivity wasn't what it is today, and that makes it feel very ahead of its time. Grace Nichols is amazing. Her poetry has real emotional heft and diversity to it, because as the collection goes on, those emotions really shift gear in a powerful and meaningful way. I was bowled over by the emotional breadth in this little book. If you've never read Grace Nichols' poetry before, please check it out. Over the past several years, I have been trying to read my way through One Piece. I'm sure everyone knows what One Piece is, but if you don't, it's a pirate-themed shonen manga that began in the 1990s. One Piece was created, written, and drawn by Eiichiro Oda, and it's still going on to this day. It's one of the longest-running mangas in history, maybe the most long-running manga in history. It's massive. I don't need to talk about what it is. Everyone knows One Piece, and I've been trying to read it, and I just keep stopping myself. I read volume 1 like 2 years ago, and I finally read volume 2 this month, and it continues to be really, really great. I grew up loving pirates. I have a pirate-themed sleeve tattoo. Pirates of the Caribbean was my favorite movie growing up, and yet I've never really sunk my teeth into One Piece. I don't want to watch the anime, I'm reading the manga, and I'm really enjoying it, but every time I read a volume and go, okay, I'll get to the next one soon, and I just don't. So this is just a little update. I'm still reading One Piece very, very slowly. This month I also discovered my new favorite horror novel, Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. Chuck Tingle is an absolute legend. He has been writing for several years these absurd bits of gay erotica. Very, very funny books. I haven't actually read them. This is all secondhand knowledge, but I've seen the covers, I've read the titles, and I've watched videos about them. Blah, blah, blah. His books are quite legendary online at this point. And who would have thunk that a guy who writes hilarious gay erotica that celebrates love would write my new favorite horror novel? It's pretty incredible. It's a book about a gay conversion camp at the heart of an evangelical Christian church in the US. Our protagonist is a teenage girl who was raised in this church/cult, and from the beginning of the novel, weird things start happening to her, like the fact that she's vomiting flies everywhere for some reason. She's an autistic and curious person who cannot suppress her curiosity. As these weird things start happening to her, including her being very definitely haunted by some kind of a demon wearing a collar, she needs to understand what's going on, why this is happening to her. And as she does so, more and more things get revealed, and this book goes from a really chilling, terrifying horror novel in its first act to a piece of investigation in the second act, and an out-and-out piece of action excitement in the third act. I love this book. I've done a video on it, go check it out. And following straight on from that is Boys in the Valley. This is a novel by American author Philip Fracassi, and while it's not my other new favorite horror novel, it is definitely the horror novel that has frightened me the most ever in my entire life. This is a chilling, disturbing, disgusting book that I loved. It's set at the turn of the 20th century in a remote valley in Pennsylvania. An orphanage has taken in a bunch of boys that are all being raised but also beaten senseless by these horrible, monstrous, twisted priests. There's one nice one who has taken a liking to our protagonist and hopes to raise him to become a member of the church when he comes of age. But then the police rock up one night with a dying man in their arms, and they explain that they had just been raiding a local cult who were doing some really screwed up stuff in the woods nearby. They killed everyone except this one man, because this one man is the sheriff's brother, and when he dies in the orphanage, it turns out he was actually possessed by an actual demon, and his death unleashes possession within the orphanage as all of these boys turn on each other and start doing really cruel and twisted things. This is a horrible book full of blood, guts, gore, trauma and torture and bleakness and horribleness and gruesomeness and blah. It's gross and I love it. Another fantastic manga that I read this month was Sakamoto Days by Yuto Suzuki. Sakamoto Days is a relatively new shonen manga that I am really enjoying. It tells the story of a guy who used to be Japan's most dangerous hitman, but he retired because he fell in love and he decided to open up his own little convenience store with his wife and his child, and now he's just a chill, mute, chubby guy. But his life gets upended when he is thrown back into it kind of by accident. The people that he used to contract for are dangerous criminals and they want him dead for abandoning them. And from there, the manga is kind of episodic, with each new chapter introducing a new character that may or may not then become part of the overall cast of very eccentric, very shonen characters. And it's a really fun, funny, charming, but also action-packed time. A story about a retired hitman coming back into the game is not really a new thing, but Sakamoto Days does it with a lot of heart and humor that I am really enjoying. Another book from my 5 books in one day series thingy that I did was Einstein's Dreams. This is a kind of short story collection by Alan Lightman, and it tells the story of Einstein. Every single tiny little short story in here is presented as a dream that Einstein has. While he was working at the patent office, he goes to sleep every night and he dreams of a concept, a place where physics and time behave differently. Every single one of these short stories is simply an idea about what if the world behaved differently? What if time worked differently in an alternate universe? What if physics behaved slightly differently? What if probability didn't work in the same way? It's really, really fun and interesting. It is just an author exploring different concepts of physics and time via a framing device where these are all dreams being had by Einstein. It's really kooky and weird and wonderful, and I loved it, and Lightman clearly knows his stuff when it comes to science fiction. I go through specific periods where I just want to devour a lot of books from a single genre. I'm sure a lot of us do this. You get into a sci-fi mood or a romance mood. I was in a fantasy mood for a few weeks, and this is one of the fantasy books that I read. I did a video on it, and I really, really like this book. This is The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke, and it is a fantasy novel that is out and out about colonialism. Our protagonist was stolen away by an empire at the age of 5, and she was raised within that empire's military. Now she's in her early 20s, and she is a lieutenant. She is a relatively well-respected member of this military. But she and a bunch of others, including the nation's princess, have returned to her homeland to try to stop a rebellion that is slowly gaining momentum, because this is a nation that was annexed by an empire and they are ready to fight back. And she needs to try and stop this rebellion, but she's obviously going to have sympathies with it because this is her home and she was stolen from this place. But she has basically been brainwashed by the military, and she argues at the beginning that she is loyal to her home. This is a really, really powerful fantasy novel. I enjoyed it so much. It's a powerful fantasy novel about colonialism and empire, and wow. In that same video, I talked about The Bone Ships by R.J. Barker. Once again, I love pirates. I love boats. From the cover, as I said in the video, I felt like this was just stealing from Robin Hobb and the Live Ship Traders, but it's not. Not at all. This is set in a collection of archipelagos that all hate each other and have been at war with each other for so long they can't even remember why at this point. It's just a war of retaliation, a war of tradition. But the war can only go on so long because every single ship on both sides is built from the bones of a sea dragon, and the sea dragons have vanished. Or have they? A sea dragon has supposedly been spotted, and our protagonist is the second in command of a ship that is going to go out and try and find this sea dragon. Initially, he was the captain, but when the book begins, a woman that he doesn't know, who has just joined his crew, challenges him to a duel, beats him, and becomes the new captain. And it turns out that she is actually the daughter of the leader of their entire archipelago. This is also a really cool book because it's set in a matriarchal society, and it works so well. The way that this male author has explored a matriarchal fantasy society of ship-faring people on tiny little islands who are perpetually at war with each other, it really works really, really well. The other fantasy book that I read was Wolfsong by T.J. Klune, who is at this point a legend. Everyone knows TJ Klune, everyone loves his books. From The House in the Cerulean Sea onwards, he has become a household name in the fantasy genre. And this book, as I've said before, is basically what if Twilight was gay and actually good? This is the story of a young man whose dad walks out on him, and he is then raised by his mother and kind of by his community in a small town in Oregon. Then a pack of werewolves move in down the road, and he bonds with them and becomes part of their pack. He learns pretty early on that they are werewolves, that's told in the blurb, and he's even given the option to be bitten and become one himself. But they say whether you get bitten or not, you are part of our pack, you are part of our family, and he starts to have this sense of belonging, which is lovely. But he also slowly develops a romance with one of the sons of this family, and that romance is a little bit weird. I went into why it's a bit weird in the video, so you can go check that out. There's definitely a problematic element to it, but it's really up to you how you see that, how you interpret it, because we all have different morals and ethics, and especially when it comes to fiction, this is not real. So I leave that to you. But it is a bit creepy. However, gay, romance, werewolves, urban fantasy, there's a lot to love here. Another manga that I really enjoyed this month was Our Teachers Are Dating by Pikachi Ohi. This is a sapphic manga. It's a really sweet lesbian story about two teachers that start dating, and they work at the same school, and all the other teachers have kind of been rooting for them to get together. There's no homophobia in this manga. It's just wholesome lesbian love. It's ridiculous in the sense that there is no drama here. It is just watching two girls fall in love, kiss each other, have sex, tell each other their secrets. Their bond grows and grows and grows, and you go, ah. It's kind of bubblegum fun. It's not serious at all, and I really enjoyed it for what it was. A book that I really loved and wish I'd made a dedicated video for is Strega. This is a Swedish novel by Joanna Leica Holm. It was published by Lolly Editions, and it was translated into English by Saskia Vogel. I am amazed by this book. It's a very short piece of pseudo-horror gothic fiction set in a town called Strega. Our protagonist is a teenage girl who has taken on this brief 3-month-long job where she works at an isolated hotel. The town of Strega is bordered by a lake and mountains and forest, and there is just this hotel that she works at. She works there with a group of other girls whom she slowly bonds with, and weird things start to happen. At the midpoint of the novel, one of these girls goes missing, and from there, bits of really chilling horror start to soak into the text. It's very gothic, but it also has a kind of Kafka-esque attitude to it, where things don't quite make sense, and the protagonist is frustrated by that. The fact that there are no guests for the longest time until there finally are, and once those guests arrive, things go badly for the girls. There's also a real feminist edge to this as well. The fact that it's the male guests causing trouble for the girls working at the hotel, and this is kind of a sad coming-of-age tale where teenage girls have to learn about the dangers out there, dangers presented by men. So there's a lot going on here. There's a little bit of horror, a lot of gothic, a little bit of Kafkaesque, an edge of feminism, and I am amazed by it, but it really is pretty trippy. Thinking about it now, it has a bit of a Twin Peaks element to it. If you love Twin Peaks, you'll really enjoy this. Then there's Pluralities by Avi Silva, a very short piece of strange and wonderful queer science fiction. There are two protagonists who are kind of connected very loosely, and we switch back and forth between them. One of them is a young person who works at a shopping mall, who quits at the beginning of the book, and they are questioning their gender identity. They have a mother who's very much a second-wave feminist who is trying to understand what's going on here, and failing, unfortunately. And they also make friends with a young trans guy who kind of guides them through this process of self-discovery and self-understanding. The other protagonist is the prince of an alien planet who has fled all responsibility by getting into a ship that is piloted by an AI, and the two of them go exploring the galaxy together. But the AI is slowly falling in love with the prince. It's pretty wacky. I really enjoyed this. This is The Black Spider. This is a very short, terrifying, twisted, strange piece of gothic fiction by Swiss author Jeremias Gotthelf. This was originally written in the early 19th century, and it's been translated here into English by Susan Bonofsky. This is a book with a really clear message, which I don't particularly like, which is just be a good, God-fearing Christian and everything will be fine. And to that I say no, no thank you. But that message does lead to a really, really fun, wacky story. It's a tale within a tale where an old man is telling a room full of people during a christening about what this valley that they all live in used to be like in the medieval period. And we flash back to the story of a lord in a castle treating all of the serfs like crap and making them build a castle for him and maintain the gardens for him while their crops are failing because they can't tend to them. And then the devil comes and tempts them all, and it goes absolutely insane. And if you're wondering where this black spider fits in, you gotta read it and find out. It's nuts. A really great piece of classic Gothic fiction that I had never read until now, and I love classic Gothic fiction so much. This is very Castle of Otranto. Oh, I'm amazed by this strange little thing. Psyche and Eros is another Greek mythology retelling by Luna McNamara, but I'm not going to talk about it here for two reasons. One, I talked about it in a really fun video that I got to do with Erica. I will link her channel in the description. Erica and I had a blast talking about this, and you can go check out that video. And the other reason is I'm going to be doing a video about this book once I've read a few other Greek mythology retellings, hopefully next month. So look forward to that. Another book I'm just going to skip over is Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, translated by Jenny Tapley Takimori. This is one of my top 5 favorite books of all time. I recently reread it, and you can go check out that video if you already haven't. I love this book. I've talked about it to death. I've written about it. I've made videos about it. Go check out my newest video where I reread it. I love this book. 2 pieces. Find out why in other videos. This is a book that I reviewed in August and really, really enjoyed, but kind of wasn't expecting to. What You Are Looking For Is in the Library. This was written by Michiko Aoyama and translated from Japanese into English by Alison Watts, and it's a collection of 5 short stories that are all kind of interlinked by a library. Each of our protagonists is a man or woman at a different stage in their life, unemployed, employed, student, in their 20s, 30s, 50s, 70s, all very different people from very different walks of life who all end up going to this one local library in the suburbs of Tokyo, where they are given a book that helps them get unstuck from their life. There's something that they are just not enjoying about their life. They feel stuck, they feel lost, they feel like they're floating, and the books that are presented to them help them figure out a way out, find a path forward through their life to continue moving forward, gaining momentum. And it's a really, really beautiful book about the power of libraries and books and how help comes from unexpected places. It's much less twee than I expected it to be, and I was really moved by it. A non-fiction that I absolutely adored this month was The Wager by David Grann. I talked about this in my most recent video on history books, and oh my god, wow, this is the first David Grann book I've read, but he also wrote The Lost City of Zed and Killers of the Flower Moon, and those books were really well praised as well. This is the story of The Wager, a ship that launched as part of a fleet during the war between the British and Spanish empires, and it ended up getting shipwrecked on an uninhabited, desolate island off the southern coast of Chile. They were shipwrecked there for a few months. They were starving, they had scurvy, and a mutiny ended up happening. While they were on the island, some died, some were killed, and this is that story. This is an amazing piece of history that reads like a mystery novel. David Grann is a fiction writer as well, and he's very good at implementing the skills of fiction writing into his non-fiction to make this feel like you're reading a novel, a really exciting and enticing piece of mystery about a shipwreck, a mutiny, and murder, as the tagline says. I loved this. Again, more ships. I love ships, I love the ocean, and it was really cool reading a non-fiction, an amazing piece of history about this horrific shipwreck and the mutiny that it led to. This is a science fiction book by Sin Blaché and Helen MacDonald called Prophet. I read it, I enjoyed it, I talked about it on Instagram, and it's really, really weird and really fun. Helen MacDonald, by the way, wrote H's for Hawk and has now turned their attention to science fiction. Really cool. Prophet begins with a field in England where an American diner has appeared out of nowhere, just popped into existence. But when you walk into this diner, you get the sense that things aren't quite right. Nothing works. There are no bathrooms. When you stare at the photos on the wall, they're photos of the people you'd expect to see in a classic piece of Americana, people like Frank Sinatra and other crooners. But the more you look at them, the more they start to not look like those people anymore. This is a weird place. It's not real, but it is real. And so our two protagonists are recruited to investigate this and a bunch of other weird things that have been going on lately. One of these protagonists is a British guy who used to work for MI6, but he has problems with alcohol, he's a complete asshole, he's not a likable person, and his partner is a guy that he fought in a war with, who's this American military guy who's really, really uptight. And the two of them become a kind of buddy cop, entertaining duo who are trying to figure out what the hell is happening here. I'm not going to tell you anymore. You can check this book out if you like. It's not perfectly well written. The dialogue between these characters is kind of tongue-in-cheek cringe, almost like the original Batman TV show. The way that these two characters talk and interact with each other is a little bit awkward, but the mystery and the way it unfolds and the entertainment value is very, very high with this book. It's a wild and fun piece of thriller science fiction. And finally, we have Cutting Teeth by Chandler Baker. This was a really fun thriller as well. Cutting Teeth tells the story of 3 different women. They are all mothers and they all live in the suburbs. And they all have young children who attend this little preschool called the Little Academy. And something has happened, something really weird, where these kids at this school are all contracting an illness that causes them to develop a real taste for human blood, and they start biting each other and biting their parents. They are biting a lot, and they also have this really sweet, very clever, but kind of insufferable teacher who soon turns up dead. And you immediately go, okay, was this suicide? Was it murder? If so, who snuck into a school and killed her in the middle of a workday? Oh, hang on, these kids like blood and are biting people. Oh my god, did the kids do it? If so, which kid? Or was it all of them? Oh my god, oh my god. It's really, really fun. And we're following these 3 mothers as they panic and try and figure this out. It's a very savvy book that is a gripping mystery thriller, but also a book about motherhood. Each of these women behaves very differently as a mother and takes motherhood on in different ways and also has her own regrets. Each of them regrets being a mother in a very different way. Or at least misses the things that childlessness offered them initially. It's a really clever book about motherhood and the expectations of motherhood and how motherhood can let you down. I was really impressed by this, especially as someone who doesn't have or want kids. I found the way that this explored motherhood and its responsibilities, and is also a weird, trippy thriller story. I found it all so endearing and entertaining and engaging. Whew. There you go. 21 books. 21 absolutely amazing books that I need you to check out. I had a blast reading all of these books. I didn't really have a single issue with anything I read this month. I had a really good time reading 21 books. Good, well done me. Well done you. I hope you had fun. I'm gonna go get some lunch. Subscribe for books.